So let's take a quick look and compare them on a computer. I'm going to use a program called ColorThink here. This allows me to plot colors and profiles in a three-dimensional space. It's actually quite interesting. First, we're going to take a look at sRGB, and of course, no real relevance because it's just this. It is what it is. So what we want to do is, okay, sRGB is this space. That means any color within this area from top to bottom is basically tone or luminosity. And then the further you get from the middle, the more saturated the color. And of course, as you get more saturated yellows, they stay lighter. More saturated blues are darker. And of course, as you make them darker, they end up with less and less saturation. Let's now compare this. I'm going to turn this back to white, and I'm going to turn on Adobe RGB, and we'll turn it into a wireframe. And this gives us a really good visual on the difference. And notice how much more blues and greens Adobe RGB can manage than sRGB. And that was the reason that Adobe developed it, is because sRGB was limited in its ability to contain colors that were within the capabilities of CMYK printers at the time. And so it gives you a pretty good idea of what it can do, and it's a larger space. Now let's compare Adobe RGB. We'll turn it to white. And let's compare it to ProPhoto RGB. And you can see how much bigger it is. And ProPhoto RGB was developed for the same reason as that Adobe had developed Adobe RGB. They needed a space that was within the capabilities of technology. And Adobe RGB no longer had the ability to record and store colors that were captured by digital cameras. And to give you a really good idea of that, what we're going to do next is take a real good look. So what I've got here is I've got this image here. So let's go back to ColorThink, and we're going to turn that on first. And here you can see those colors spread over this three-dimensional area. Basically, each of these dots represents one of the dots in that file I just showed you. Now what I'm going to do is turn on sRGB, and you can see all the colors that were captured and stored in that are now quite apparent, because anything that you can't see is inside the space. Let's turn on Adobe RGB, and you can see still we have a lot of colors, especially over in here. Let's make those dots a tiny bit bigger so they're a little more obvious. There we go. A lot of colors that are in our file that even in the blues and the greens where Adobe RGB is strongest. And of course, if we turn on ProPhoto RGB and we make it white, suddenly see that pretty much all the colors now are contained. There's a few that are right at the edge, but for the most part, they're contained. So let's talk about what happens if we need to move those colors into those spaces. So here's our colors. And what I can do is I can turn this into a vector. And what it'll do is it'll make a line from where the color starts to where it has to end up if we want to push it into sRGB. And you can see all of these colors move to the edge of that sRGB space. And if we turn that off, you can see how all those colors end up kind of blocking up. And that's one of the challenges, is when we do this, we can block them up. Now, there's some rendering intents that help avoid that a little bit. But let's now change it to Adobe RGB. And we'll turn Adobe RGB on. And you can see how we still have to move a lot of colors a long, long way to get them into the Adobe RGB space. So all these colors that are way out here are gone once we make them Adobe RGB. And only if we if we now do that to ProPhoto, now you'll notice that we have hardly any lines. At the very fringe, we have a few that we have to move a little bit. You can see these yellows. And I think there's a few greens that have to move a little bit. Well, maybe one green. But we don't have, so we can keep our colors where they are, and we don't have to change those colors until we're ready to go to an output device. Now, how big of a problem is it? Well, let's do one more thing for this video. Just to, like I said, all I'm trying to do is make sure you understand the importance of choosing a good working space. So I'm going to turn on the space for, this is the color space for an Epson P9000 printer printing on Epson premium luster paper. So these are all the colors that printer's capable of printing on a sheet of paper, on that particular paper. Now, if our image is in sRGB, then any color, anywhere you see color, that's colors that could be in the file and that could be printed, and yet sRGB will clip and remove. If we turn on Adobe RGB, we still have this huge area of color here and these areas of reds and greens that the printer can print, and yet we can't print because they're not in the file anymore because we clipped it to Adobe RGB. And of course, if we go to ProPhoto RGB, you can see the entire space is contained. So we don't have to lose any colors at all, and we can maximize the capability of our device when we convert it to that space. And that's what we're going to talk about the next video, is how do we convert these colors. Let's go back here. Let's turn the ProPhoto off and let's turn our colors on and go to points. How do we convert these colors that are outside of our printer space to the printer space to maximize the quality? Now, if we go and turn on Adobe RGB just for as an example. All right, so now you can see anything that any color you can see that's inside the wireframe is a color the printer can print, and yet Adobe RGB would clip. So all of the subtlety of these colors here, you would lose because all of this mass would go into Adobe, and then when you print it, you can't pull it back out. And so, and as printers get better, here's a bunch of blues that you would lose as well. And so you'd actually start blocking up. In this particular image, you would block up your yellows pretty bad. Now, it wouldn't look horrible. It wouldn't look disgusting or anything, but it's certainly not the maximum quality you can get.